Good day or good evening, and welcome to the Real Estate with Wendy podcast. As always, in the booth with me is Jean.
And I have a lot to say today.
Well, let's jump right in and start discussing today's topic. Buying into pre-foreclosures. What is this, you may ask? Let me walk you through what happened to another investor that I work with. In telling you his story, you will begin to understand the process. Then we will break it down a little bit. Okay, Jean, how about you tell your story?
Well, Wendy, as you know, after a podcast or two, I kind of off air started asking a lot more questions about investing. Told you that I had a meager $20,000 and that maybe if something came your way, let me know. I think it was a random Tuesday and we had already scheduled our next podcast, but you called and I assumed that you were going to, it was going to be a business call. Instead, you said, I have this pre-foreclosure investment. And I believe the quote is, if you don't take advantage of it, I will.
That's right. I was going to jump all over it, but you had been asking me to please find something that you could start in investing with. And of course, there's always a place to get started, even if you don't have a ton of money.
Right. And as I'm new at this and really know nothing about it, but maybe as little as maybe some of our podcast listeners, if they're new to this as well, I had it in my head that I would need at least $60,000, $80,000 to start, and that's not going to happen right now with my day job. But I have been good over the past 3 or 4 years and had gotten real close by the time of your phone call to $20,000. I guess I'll continue the story for you and share to our audience that the deal you were presented with was with a family member or just outside of the family. So it is a pretty good deal, a sweetheart deal, as I mentioned before. But over time, after we went through the signing and everything, I understood kind of why you wanted to keep your distance from it too, just because of deals that kind of came my way. If anything bad should happen, I guess that was my only fear. And you very quickly said, well, if she doesn't pay at this point, this is to your advantage. If she doesn't pay at this point, this is to your advantage. And we just go from there.
Correct. Now, let me ask you something, Jean. If it wasn't paid by the 6-month point, what was the ramification?
I would get more money.
And if it wasn't paid by the 12-month point, what was the ramification?
I would get, I guess when we started this, about a $200,000 home. Only now with inflation and the market changing, I'd say more like about a $350,000 home.
Exactly. So worst case scenario, you wind up with a house that's worth $350,000 and all you've put into it was almost $20,000. That sounds like a sweetheart deal to me.
Yes, so I thank you already as I have received the first check and a phone call from the borrower who has already said she would like to take advantage of the full 12-month option. So therefore, I went from a 10% turnaround to a 15% turnaround right around the time I received my first kind of good faith check.
That sounds amazing. And I hope that everything works out to your advantage. I hope that since it's a family member, that they don't lose their house. But at the same time, I'm really rooting for you.
Odd to hear, but now I understand why. Yes, this is kind of fun. It's like gambling without the gamble.
Right. It's a little bit like a lot of things in real estate. There really is no gamble. Once you get into it and you start understanding how the process really works, there is no gambling involved. It's all just direct make money.
Well, something in my own life that paralleled the borrower was that she was in a marriage that had ended and she was not the financial person in the partnership. And so when she got stuck with not a balloon payment, but an ARM, is that right? An ARM payment?
Correct, an ARM loan.
Which I didn't know what that was. It's basically a balloon payment that doesn't come at the end, correct?
Correct.
She kind of got hit out of nowhere or by surprise while she was paying her mortgage, paying on time, paying the full amount. Once she hit the ARM during the COVID times, they weren't going to take her house, but at the same time, correct me if I'm wrong, they would not accept her checks.
That is correct.
which again, all of this is new to me. All of this surprised me. So because of the contract legally her and her ex-husband had entered into, she could not pay a partial payment of that arm. She had to pay it in full. She did not have 20,000. You reached out to me knowing I had almost 20,000, and we went from there.
That's right. I remember the day that I met with you guys in the office and talked through with both of you what the terms of the contract would be, what was most amicable and agreeable to both of you, and what type of things we needed to put into and leave out so that everyone would be happy. In this case, it's just a matter of writing everything down, getting the proper contracts, the proper verbiage, and then, of course, making sure that both parties are comfortable with the transaction and what's going to take place. I wanted to make sure that I discussed not only with you how you were going to get paid back, and if you didn't get paid back, what the next steps were. I wanted to make sure that I discussed with her, here's why you have to pay this back. Here's why you have to, here in this many months, go ahead and start trying to acquire your own loan to get this paid back and pay him off. Because if you don't do it in this time frame, you still lose your house.
And something I'd like to thank you for, a month or two later, is that you took the math out of it for both her and I, who know nothing about real estate investing and only manage our own finances. And both her and I do that well, I believe, in our own household. But I appreciate that we took out percentages and we talked dollar amounts. And that was important to her, which is good because it made it easier for me. She said, how much do you want to make on this? What is it worth to you? And I said, well, I think 2,000 would be good, which of course is 10%. And then you very quickly, without pointing out that that was probably way too low for us both, went ahead and said, okay, well, let's do that for 6 months. If you want to do this very short, quick investment loan, make 2,000 off 20, no big deal. But let's give an option of maybe turning it into a 12-month loan, and then I would get 15% back, which would be 3,000 off my 20,000. And so I was okay with that. Again, I felt like I was helping out a kindred spirit in financial distress that I could have been in just a few years earlier, but it made me feel even better when I got 15% back on my generosity, not just 10.
Yes, I always try to point out in any contract or negotiations, if something doesn't feel right or I feel like it's too low, I try to say in front of all parties, hey, this is what the norm is. Here's what you should be earning for this. Let's try to fit it in so that we're doing it this way so that, again, not only is she happy, but you're happy too. We can't have you throwing your money out there and not getting a good return.
And in my case, I know you were looking out for me, a coworker, and her, a family member. But I'm sure many of you listening to this podcast are thinking, boy, why didn't they start off with 35%? And now I'm wondering that too.
Well, again, this is why you want to make sure that you put everything down in writing. And that way, if it's in the contract, you can easily enforce it. Okay, so I heard about this person who was far behind on a balloon mortgage, basically, an arm loan. It was about $19,000, and it was about to be foreclosed on, and she was going to lose her home. This was somebody who is extended family to me. So I knew that Jean, a friend and a co-investor, was wanting to start investing, but he did not have any knowledge or any way to get a mortgage at that time. So he asked me to be on the lookout for something that he could do for about that price, $19,000 or $20,000. And of course, this falls right into my lap, this $19,000 or $20,000 that this person needs in order to save her home. So, of course, I called Gene up and I explained the details of what was happening and gave him information on how to reach her directly. And from there, we discussed terms. I met with each of them separately to make sure everyone was on to the same page with the terms. And then we all met together and we drew up a contract and repayment terms. Everyone walked away happy that day. If the loan is not paid back, what happens then? Should I let Gene explain? Well, he ends up with the house.
Well, something too, I guess I should point out is that I'm not getting a big check at the end. I'm actually getting, what do you call it, a good faith check monthly?
Correct.
It's almost like a little bit of rent on the loan. In the end, I will have made $3,000, but the truth is she's paying me back a percentage of that 3,000 every month, and then I'll get my initial investment back as one check once she refinances her house.
Yes, correct. And in fact, if this does not happen, I'll put in here and go ahead and interject that if this does not get paid back, if she misses a payment, if she were to be late or decide she can't do this after all, then the next step for you would be a trip to the courthouse to go ahead and start that lien process.
Well, one other thing about those good faith checks is that I just assumed that when you invest, months go by, years go by, whatever it is, and, you give 20,000, I'm going to get 23 at the end. I kind of like the fact that I get a little bit every month. Kind of, like I said, it's kind of like a little bit of a rent check. I haven't really invested in a home or in a rental home, yet somehow I'm getting a monthly check, not as big as a rent check, but I'm getting back my investment up front where I'll get back my loan that was borrowed at the end.
Think about it like this, too. If instead of being 20 grand, it was 60 grand, that monthly rent check would be $750, which would be right on point with buying a house of that price. You would be doing incredibly well in your investment dealings. And this is how we mathematically do our equations.
And that goes back to what I initially told you is as soon as I get $60,000, I'd like to purchase a rental. And now you've helped me make $3,000 more to get closer to my $60,000.
Wait till we start talking about tax sales.
Well, I did something. I watched the taxes instead of watching the mortgage and looked up how much is owed on my mom's neighbor's house.
Wow, and what did you come up with on this?
I found a little bit of disappointment. What I found was that the taxes owed were only about $2,200. So I called the tax commissioner of the county, and unfortunately, what I learned was just days before, the mortgage company had paid those taxes. Therefore, the house would not be going to the courthouse steps.
Oh, that's terrible. But I would say this, keep watching. Even though it may not be going to the tax sale, it might be going into foreclosure and you might still have a chance to get it. It just depends whether or not this could be a good deal is going to depend on how much is owed on that mortgage. If it's a brand new mortgage and at a high amount, hundreds of thousands of dollars, then maybe it's not a good investment for an investor. But let's say, for example, this person has been paying on this mortgage for 20 years, and there's only a few years left on it at a very small amount every month. Then maybe suddenly this is an incredible investment.
Something else I learned by, looking into this myself is that I had read online that this particular county had an auction at the first Tuesday of every month. So my initial question to the tax commissioner was, is this property up this, next Tuesday? And her immediate response is, even if it is up for auction, it wouldn't be this coming Tuesday. In this county, we only have an auction every 3 months.
Yes, a lot of smaller counties don't do them every month because there's not enough to have an auction every single month. They do it every 3 or 4 months because that's when they have enough properties to gather together into the auction. Well, I would say let's just keep an eye on your mother's friend's property and it may come back around. So now let's go back and let's talk about pre-foreclosures some more and break this down. Step number 1 is going to be to listen all the time. If you're in church, if you're at the restaurant, if you're with friends, if you're with family, listen everywhere you go to every person that you talk to and listen out for a deal that could be had on real estate, whether it's a pre-foreclosure or someone has passed on and now they're trying to, deal with the sale of the house. These all are really good opportunities to get in and do something. Step 2. Now, once you have found out about these deals, whether they're pre-foreclosures or other types of deals, The next thing you're going to want to do is talk and negotiate terms with the distressed owner and find out what exactly it is that they need to have done. Listening here is absolutely the key. So you deal with them and then you go between the investor to try to work on those terms. Step number 3 is going to be to write up the contract and have all the parties sign it. Step number 4 is going to be to go to the courthouse and to file these papers and attach the lien if and when you need to. Sometimes you want to do that right away as soon as you get the deal, and other times when you're dealing with family perhaps, you may want to wait. Either way, once you've gotten that taken care of, we get back to step number 5, and that's the most fun part. You get paid with the interest that you get paid back until the loan is paid for, or you get the home in the case that the whatever payment terms were not paid back.
One thing I can say is that if I had heard a podcast about pre-foreclosures, I would not have thought they actually come around that often or are really something that's easy to find, and then it just kind of fell in your lap.
Yes, that's the way it happens, and quite often as well. When you're in the business of being an investor or doing real estate all the time, as we are, you're going to hear about mortgages. You're going to be talking to your bank. You're going to be hearing about foreclosures. In fact, I have mine sent to me on my computer. So I get the pre-foreclosure list. I get the tax lien list. I get all of these things coming into my email. Not only that, everybody who knows me knows that I'm in real estate and investing. So if they hear about a deal or if they hear about someone who's in trouble, they come straight to me. And I have marketed myself as such so that I get the phone call first. Okay, if we have time, I'm going to tell the nectarine story. I got this deal by just hearing the woes of a friend at church. I believe I was in prayer group, and she was sitting there telling me that she needed prayers because she was about to lose her house. Now, her house was about to be lost for taxes, and the same principles apply here for pre-tax sales and pre-foreclosures. So I just listened to the distressed person and tried to figure out what it was that she needed. I listened to hear that her husband, who really owned the house, was deceased. And she legally couldn't even sell her house if she wanted to. It was paid in full. There was no mortgage on it. However, the tax man was fixing to come and take it away from her. So I just, again, listened to find out what her needs were and then wrote up the contract knowing that she had very different needs than your situation with your pre-foreclosure. In this case, what we did was she sold her house to my investor friend and myself. We partnered up so that we could both do it better together. We paid her taxes. We paid for the probate to take it out of their deceased husband's name so that we could legally buy it. We paid for the closing, and we paid her another $10,000 and move on. If she had not made this deal with us, she would have lost everything. She would have lost her house. She would have had no money. She would not have been able to move on into a new place, and she would have pretty much been just out there twisting in the wind, I guess is one way to say it. However, she did do the deal with us, and what she ended up with was the money to go ahead and find another place to live. She had the ability, without it harming her credit or getting a foreclosure or getting anything against her at all, she had all of her belongings still, and she was not distressed about a place to go. We gave her the opportunity to instead move forward. My investor friend and I, we cleaned out that house. We did it all ourselves. We cleaned it up just a little bit. We got rid of the things that she left behind. And after about a week of, cleaning and scrubbing, basically, we sold it for a 60% profit. And this is in a down market, I believe in 2008. After that, we split the profits and we moved on to our next adventure. If you need help figuring out what type of contract to write up for your deal, you can always go to Google. You can do what I prefer, which is ask a realtor. You can ask an attorney or even attempt to write your own yourself. I recommend researching the type that you may need. Do we have any other questions?
So when I was hearing that story, I felt kind of bad for the, I assume, little old lady who had, I assume she was elderly.
Yes, she was elderly. She did go to my church, and she is still a friend of mine. And again, this is a situation that she was very, very, very unfortunately in, and there was no getting out of for her. If we had not come along and given her the $10,000 and given her the $6,000 that it cost to go through probate and have it taken out of her deceased husband's name and then into hers to sell, she would have never gotten anything except for out on the street. So she was super, super happy. I know it sounds like maybe she was raked over the coals, but 10,000 is a lot of money for someone like herself to now be able to move forward. She was happy. Of course, we were happy, and everybody thought it was a good deal.
And that was my first impression. Was I felt bad that she had to move away from her home at all, but then I realized maybe she was an age that this helped her, like you said, move forward to scale down or maybe get into an assisted living situation where now she actually had rent money. This obviously was the best case scenario. Either way, she was probably going to have to leave that property.
Right. And for her, there were many reasons that upon hearing what her needs were in the very, very beginning and hearing about this deal, she wanted to be in a smaller house. She wanted to be in a place that did not have stairs. She wanted to be in a place that did not remind her of where her husband passed away right there in that house. So for her, many, many reasons that if she had have been able to sell her home, she would have sold her home, but there was no way she was going to be able to get through probate, and there was no way that she would have had money left over in a down market in the condition the house was in. She wasn't getting a lot for it anyways. She was super happy about 10 grand because at that time and in that area, houses were selling for about that price in cash. Thank you for joining me for another Real Estate with Wendy podcast. And hey, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at realestatewendypodcast@gmail.com. We may do a special podcast if we get enough questions to just cover all of the questions that you have, and we'll answer those one by one. Thank you for tuning in to the Real Estate with Wendy podcast.